What's up, Carbon Collective? My name is Zach Stein. I am one of our co-founders, and I'm really excited to show you the articles that stood out to us this month in terms of climate change, the fight that is going on to solve it, and getting into the economics. There's some interesting ones here. So let's go ahead and dig in. So the headline article of this newsletter is this: Appalachia's fracking industry may never be profitable again. This is a new report that came out, and it really stood out to us because this was such a big issue in the Biden in the election in 2020. Biden kept getting pressed of was he for or against fracking, and what about the people in Pennsylvania? And a recent article showed that a report from the Stockholm Environment Institute's their U.S. Center and the Ohio River Valley Institute show that the point is probably moot because expanding drilling is not even likely to be profitable. What this report looked at was these 200 potential drilling sites and looked at the economics of would they be profitable. And what they found, what is the biggest lever arm of profitability? It's just the price of natural gas. Unfortunately for the shale drillers, and fortunately for the rest of us, is that projections, even the most bullish projections by the Department of Energy, projects that gas consumption is going to stay flat over the next decade. We saw it, let's check out this graph, we saw it actually rise over this period. This was as gas really stepped up to replace coal in a lot of power plants. And we've seen it go up pretty sharply at times, and that's led to rises in pricing, and you've seen kind of fracking go up and down with it as the way to extract that gas. But then looking at what is here, the AEO, the U.S. Department of Energy, they expect it to remain relatively flat over the next decade. And then all of the projections of what it looks like in order for us to decarbonize have us going down. So this is, the IEA, the International Energy Agency, their Sustainable Development Scenario hitting 1.5, the Deep Decarbonization Pathway Project, all have gas significantly reducing. And so what is really stood out to us about this is that it's because renewable energy has gotten cheaper that natural gas is an even less desirable choice. So it's not just that from a policy perspective that we need to cut our gas demand, but that actually purely from the economics, this is happening. And this is why doing things like installing solar panels, switching to an induction stove, switching away from using a gas-powered furnace and heating, this actually matters because these wells will get drilled depending upon supply and demand. Hopefully we have further regulation, which makes it harder and more expensive. We get rid of the fossil fuel subsidies and all of that. That makes it even less profitable to do so. But the other side of that coin is the demand side of economics. And that's what you and me, we have the power to do. And so we found this to be really promising. Obviously, there is a lot of work to be done to make sure that the employees and the people who depend upon these type of wells for their livelihood have the right way to transition. There is a lot of cool solar projects being installed in the area, and so we hope to see more of that. Okay, article number 2. This was so cool. If you've ever read the Breakthrough Institute or heard of them, they take a bit of a counter viewpoint to a lot of kind of more classic environmentalist views, especially on climate. So we are big fans of their work, and this is a recent report that came out in April that looked back and wanted to see, okay, we have a lot of GDP data, and GDP is a good standard for how much has an economy grown over that time. And there has been a kind of running debate, especially in the fossil fuel community, of saying the only way that you can grow the economy is to increase uses of fossil fuels and increase emissions. And that is wrong. This decoupling of economic growth and emissions happened in 32 countries. And so we can look here, it's a lot of European countries, but also some in Asia and some in Latin America. And we can see that there's a significant increase in GDP over this time, with even in the case of Poland, rising 66% in terms of their GDP, but without increasing emissions. The theory that you would have to increase emissions to run those economies, 66% as well, is just not true. And so then we look at a country like Denmark, which increased, but that had very large cuts. We can really see what's possible. Or someone like a country like Ireland really stands out in terms of having 89% increase in its emissions, or in its GDP, while cutting emissions by 24%. So this adds even more credence to the fact that we don't need fossil fuels to grow our economies and push towards a world that is truly sustainable and decarbonized. Okay, the third article comes from the Rainforest Action Network, very scary website. What they do is they publish an annual report, amongst other things, in which they look at banks and they look at how much of those banks, how much of their loans are going to support the fossil fuel industry and specifically fossil fuel expansion. So it's a really interesting, detailed report. It's really scary. They do really great work. And so when we actually look at the report itself, let me move my face here. What we can see is that JP Morgan Chase has been far and away the largest over the past 5 years. And what's crazy is that this has been what they look at is since the Paris Climate Accords. And so for them, I mean, look how much money that they've been spending on fossil fuel expansion. And not only is this just morally reprehensible, but it's also as a company, these loans, they might be 5-year, 10-year, 20-year loans on these fossil fuel sites going into it. So that is directly tying JP Morgan Chase and their future to the future of fossil fuels and that extraction. So there's a lot of financial risk in that, which is a big part of why, I mean, again, just from that moral standpoint, but that why we divest from them, because we don't want to take on that risk in our portfolios and we don't want to support them by owning their shares. And so if you look down the list, it's basically just the biggest banks that are out there. It's really hard. And then a company like BNP Paribas, I'm not sure exactly if that's how you pronounce it, stands out to me because they, one of their subsidiary banks is called Bank of the West. And Bank of the West has been having a huge greenwashing campaign right now. But then look at their spending. Okay, in 16, 17, 16, 28, 40 billion in 2020. So they did, at the same time they did this big greenwashing campaign, they've massively expanded their investments in the fossil fuel industry and their loans out to it. So this is, again, this is a really great report to look at. Where are your deposits being put to work? There are many companies, there are credit unions, there are green banks that are increasingly coming that that either just do less bad, they do traditional banking, in that they make money off of things like mortgages and auto loans and home loans, or they do actively good banking. Like there's a couple of startups, Ando and Atmos, where they actually put your money to be building renewable energy. So if you're interested, this is a really detailed report. It's super interesting. Would definitely suggest that you check it out. Article number 4 is a reinforcement of what we all know. Climate change is caused by human activities. It is not caused by external things like changes in solar radiance from the sun. So this is a common myth put forward by climate deniers. They basically say that it's humans, we are small, how could we be impacting this whole planet? The sun is large. The sun does have changes in what's called solar irradiance, which is how much heat and light is coming from the sun. And so we've actually been seeing an increase of that, and that's led to the rising temperatures. And that is actually just doesn't match the science whatsoever. We have a lot of satellites that have been watching the sun. We have a lot of temperature global weather stations, 26,000 of them around the Earth. And what you could see is that even though there is variations in solar radiance, in the same way that there's variations in average temperature, that the trend of average temperature has been rising, whereas over the past 40 years now, the average solar irradiance has been falling. Climate denial can be really attractive. Let's be honest about that. Climate change is really scary. Thinking about this line projecting off into the future. So thinking that it's not us, but it's some external force or some pressure, something that we can't control that is causing the rising temperatures that we're seeing in our changing weather patterns. That could be really comforting. And so looking for an explanation for that could be something that is really attractive. But it's wrong. There has been no theory proposed by the climate deniers community that has held up. And there's not even agreement in that community of what is the cause of rising temperatures. So this is just an important thing to know, especially climate deniers tend to come in with a lot of facts and data. But when we actually look at it and look at your side, it doesn't go against them. So as someone who cares about climate change, it's just important to sometimes have this, when you're sitting around the table at Thanksgiving or something like that, have this in your back pocket and be able to point to. So that's it for this month. If you have any questions, you can email us at hello@carboncollective.co, and really appreciate you watching and your continued support.